Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're diving deep into the tale of the hike. It's a classic of Japanese literature.
It really
I'm
is.
only excited to explore it.
Yeah, me too. It's a war chronicle.
Yeah.
But it's also so much more than that. I mean, it's steeped in Buddhist philosophy. It explores these ideas about impermanence and the fleeting nature of power.
And fate.
Right, and fate and human action.
All those big questions.
Exactly. It's been resonating with readers for centuries because of those powerful themes.
So maybe we should start by giving our listeners a little bit of background about the Heian period, which is the era in which this story unfolds.
Sure. So the Heian period spanned from the late 8th century to the late 12th century. It was a time of great cultural flourishing in Japan, known for its art, poetry, and courtly rituals.
I've always been fascinated by Heian literature.
Oh, yeah. It's a fascinating period. But beneath that surface of refinement, you also have all this political tension, power struggles between different aristocratic clans.
And that's where the Taira clan comes in.
Exactly. The Taira, also known as the Heike, were one of the most powerful clans during the Heian period. They rose to prominence through military prowess, and by the mid-12th century, they had amassed significant wealth and influence.
And they were known for their extravagance.
Oh.
The book really dives into the details of their opulent lifestyle.
It does. The Tale of the Heike doesn't shy away from depicting the Taira's opulence at all. Their grand palaces, their elaborate costumes, lavish banquets.
It's almost like those descriptions are meant to be a little bit seductive.
I think so. But those descriptions aren't just there for entertainment. I
Oh.
think they serve a deeper purpose.
What do you think the deeper purpose is?
Well, I think the book uses the Taira's extravagance to illustrate this Buddhist concept of impermanence.
Oh, interesting.
All that wealth, all that power, it's ultimately fleeting. And the more the Taira cling to it, the harder their fall will be.
It's like that famous opening line of the book. The sound of the bell of Jinshoya echoes the impermanence of all things. It really sets the tone for the entire epic.
Yes, exactly. It's a reminder that everything in life, even the most magnificent achievements, is subject to change and decay.
So we've got the Taira at the height of their power, surrounded by opulence. Who are some of the key figures we should know about?
Well, the main character, in a sense, is the Taira clan itself. But within that larger story, there are several individuals who stand out. There's Kiyomori, the patriarch of the clan.
He's one who leads them to their peak of power, right?
Yes, he is. He's ambitious and also ruthless.
Can you give us an example of his ruthlessness?
Well, one instance that comes to mind is Kiyomori's treatment of the retired emperor Go-Shirakawa. He basically forces Go-Shirakawa into retirement and places his own grandson on the throne.
Well,
It shows how Kiyomori was willing to manipulate even the imperial family to achieve his goals.
that's a real power move.
It is, and it also shows how Kiyomori's ambition, while successful at first in consolidating the Taira's power, it also kind of sows the seeds for their eventual downfall.
How so?
His actions created enemies and bred resentment, and ultimately contributed to the karmic forces that would bring about the clan's ruin.
So we're starting to see this theme of karma emerge.
Yes, definitely. The book is very much concerned with the idea of karma, the Buddhist principle that actions have consequences.
Right.
The Taira's rise to power involved acts of cruelty, arrogance, and disregard for others. And all those actions will eventually come back to haunt them.
So you're saying the downfall isn't just bad luck
Yeah.
or political maneuvering, it's also a result of their own choices.
Exactly, their own karmic burden.
So we have Kiyomori,
Yes.
this ambitious and ruthless leader. Who else should we be paying attention to?
Well, there's also Kiyomori's nephew, Yorimori, who initially serves as a voice of caution within the clan. He sees the danger of Kiyomori's ambition and tries to steer him toward a more moderate path.
Does he succeed?
Sadly, no. Yorimori's warnings fall on deaf ears, and Kiyomori continues his pursuit of power.
That's interesting. This clash between Yorimori and Kiyomori
Yeah,
highlights the tension between wisdom and ambition,
absolutely.
between those who see the bigger picture and those who are blinded by their desires.
Exactly.
And of course, we can't forget the Minamoto clan, the Taira's rivals.
Right, the Minamoto, also known as the Genji, they're essential to the story. They represent the opposing force to the Taira's dominance. They're marginalized at first, forced into the shadows by Kiyomori.
But I'm guessing they don't stay in the shadows forever.
You're right about that. As the Taira's grip on power starts to weaken, the Minamoto seize the opportunity to rise up and challenge them.
Leading to the Genpei War.
Precisely, the central conflict of the Tale of the Heike.
And this war, it's about more than just political power, isn't it?
You're right, it's a symbolic struggle. between two different ways of life, two different sets of values.
Interesting.
The Taira, with their extravagance and courtly refinement, they represent the old order, the waning days of the Heian period.
Nice.
And then you have the Minamoto. With their emphasis on military strength and discipline, they represent the rising power of the warrior class, the harbingers of a new era in Japanese history.
So we have this epic clash brewing between two powerful clans,
We do.
each representing a different vision of Japan's future. And all of this is unfolding against this backdrop of a profound Buddhist worldview
Yes.
that emphasizes impermanence and the consequences of actions. I am hooked. Tell me how this conflict plays out.
Okay. So the Genpei War is a long and bloody conflict, full of twists and turns. But one of the key moments that captures the tragic essence of the war is the Battle of Dan Nora, the final showdown between the two clans.
This is the one where the Taira suffer a devastating defeat.
Exactly, it's a naval battle. And the Taira, despite their initial advantage, are ultimately outmaneuvered and overwhelmed by the Minamoto forces.
And there's that incredibly poignant scene where the Taira women choose to drown themselves rather than be captured.
Yes, the scene is heartbreaking. It speaks to the honor code of the samurai, the idea that death is preferable to dishonor.
But it also highlights the devastating consequences of the Taira's actions.
It does.
Their pursuit of power led to the destruction of their entire clan.
Including innocent women and children.
Even the child emperor Entoku drowns.
Yes, he does.
It's such a powerful image.
It really drives home the book's message about the impermanence of all things, even the most exalted positions of power.
So the Taira, who once seemed invincible, are reduced to a handful of survivors.
Yes, they are.
Their dreams of glory swallowed by the sea. So the Tairas are defeated. The Minamoto are victorious. Does the book end on a triumphant note?
Not exactly. While the Minamoto do achieve their goal of overthrowing the Taira, the book doesn't present their victory as a simple triumph. There's this sense of melancholy, a recognition of the terrible cost of war that lingers over the final chapters.
So even in victory, there's a sense of loss.
There is.
A realization that power is a double-edged sword.
Exactly.
The Tale of the Heike. It's such a complex work.
It is.
It doesn't offer any easy answers.
No, it does.
It challenges us to think about the nature of power, the consequences of our actions, and the fleeting nature of all things. Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to make sure we touch on one more key figure. You mentioned Kiyomori and Yorimori. But what about Yoshitsune, the Minamoto warrior who plays such a pivotal role in the war?
Ah, yes, Yoshitsune. He is a fascinating character, a brilliant military strategist, and a skilled swordsman. He really embodies the rising power of the samurai.
I've heard he's often portrayed as a tragic hero.
He is a figure who achieves great things, but is ultimately doomed by his own talents and the jealousy of his brother Yoritomo.
That sounds like a story we need to delve into further. But for now, let's leave our listeners with that tantalizing cliffhanger.
Sounds good to me. We'll be back to explore Yoshitsune's role in the war and the complex dynamics within the Minamoto clan.
I can't wait.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the tale of the Heike. Last time we left off with the Taira clan at the height of their power, but those seeds of their downfall already sown.
Yeah, their extravagance and ruthlessness.
Yeah.
Especially under Kiyomori. It felt like they were almost inviting karma to come knocking.
Right. But this time, I think we should turn our attention to the other side of the conflict, the Minamoto clan.
Yes, you mentioned Yoshitsune and how he embodies this rising samurai spirit.
Exactly.
He seems almost legendary.
He really does.
Both brilliant and tragic. What can you tell us about him?
Well, Yoshitsune is almost like a prototype for the classic samurai hero. Incredibly skilled in warfare, a master swordsman, a brilliant tactician.
So not just brute force.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The tale of the Heike portrays him as very refined, even poetic. There are scenes where he's composing verse, showing a sensitivity that contrasts with the brutality of war.
That duality is so interesting.
It is.
We see these contrasts throughout the book.
Yes.
The Taira's extravagance versus the Buddhist ideal of detachment, and now Yoshitsune, the warrior, who's also an artist.
That's a great point. These contrasts, they're everywhere in the book. They reflect the complexities of life. Nothing is purely good or evil, strong or weak. Even war, which is usually seen as the ultimate act of violence, has its own codes of honor and moments of beauty, however fleeting.
You mentioned Yoshitsune as a tragic hero. What makes his story tragic?
Well, despite his brilliance, Yoshitsune is constantly overshadowed by his older brother, Yoritomo. Yoritomo, as the elder, is the head of the clan, and he's the one who ultimately benefits politically. from Yoshitsune's military victories.
Classic sibling rivalry, but with much higher stakes.
Exactly. And the book hints that Yoritomo is deeply envious of Yoshitsune's talents and popularity. There's even a scene where Yoritomo refuses to let Yoshitsune enter the capital after a major victory, denying him the recognition he deserves.
So even though he's winning the battles, he's losing in the game of power.
That's the tragedy of his character. He's brilliant in war, but naive about politics. He trusts his brother, but that trust is betrayed.
This tension between them, it seems crucial to the Minamoto victory.
It is.
It's not just a straightforward defeat of the Taira, but this story of internal conflict as well.
Absolutely. And this internal conflict mirrors those larger themes of impermanence and the danger of clinging to power.
Even though they defeat the Taira, their victory is tainted by suspicion and betrayal.
Right.
It's like the book is saying that power, even when earned righteously, can still corrupt.
Yes.
And that corruption can be just as destructive as the extravagance and ruthlessness we saw with the Taira.
Exactly. The book doesn't offer easy answers. It portrays both the Taira and the Minamoto as complex figures, flawed, capable of both great heroism and terrible cruelty.
So what happens to Yoshitsune?
Well, I don't want to spoil the ending for our listeners, but let's just say that Yoshitsune's story doesn't have a happy ending. He becomes a victim of his brother's paranoia and is forced to flee for his life.
It's incredible how the book balances these sweeping historical events with these very personal stories. We see the grand narrative of the Genpei War, but also get these intimate glimpses into the lives of those caught in the conflict.
That is one of the things that makes the tale of the hike so powerful. It operates on multiple levels, weaving together history, legend,
And philosophy.
and philosophy.
Speaking of legend, there are all these stories about Yoshitsune's skill and bravery. Didn't he study swordsmanship with mythical mouthy spirits?
Yes, that story really captures how the book blurs the lines between history and myth. It's said that Yoshitsune, as a young boy, was sent to train at a temple on Mount Kurama, a place steeped in folklore, and considered a dwelling place for Tengu, those mythical creatures with superhuman abilities.
So he learned his swordsmanship from these Tengu,
That's the story.
like something out of a martial arts movie.
I know. This story, whether it's historically accurate or not, adds another layer to Yoshitsune. He's not just a skilled warrior, he's almost supernatural.
This mixing of history and myth, it feels deliberate.
I think it is.
Like they're trying to create a sense of epic grandeur,
Right.
elevate the story beyond just a factual account.
I think you're right. It captures the spirit of the age, a time when the line between the real and the supernatural was much more fluid.
So we have these amazing stories about Yoshitsune's skill and bravery. But the book also highlights the darker side of war, doesn't it?
It does. The Tale of the Hike doesn't romanticize war. It portrays it as brutal and tragic, full of loss and suffering.
Even the Minamoto are shown to be capable of great cruelty.
Yes, they are.
There's that scene where Kumagai Naozan, a Minamoto warrior, kills the young Taira warrior Atsumori.
That scene is so heartbreaking.
It really is.
Atsumori is just a teenager, barely more than a boy, and Kumagai, despite his hesitation, ultimately kills him in single combat.
It's so powerful
It is.
because it shows the tragic cost of war,
Right.
how it forces individuals to do things they would never do in peacetime.
And Kumagai is clearly haunted by what he did.
He is.
He's not a monster. He's a seasoned warrior. He understands the necessity of killing in battle, but he's also capable of compassion. After he kills Atsumori, he finds a flute among the boy's belongings and realizes he's taken the life of a young man with so much potential, a young man who loved music and beauty.
It's like that scene is a microcosm of the whole war.
I agree.
The clash of armies,
Mhm.
political struggles.
Yeah.
But it boils down to these individual moments of loss and suffering.
And that's where the book's Buddhist themes of impermanence and the fleeting nature of life come into play.
The scene with Atsumori reminds us that even in the midst of this grand historical drama, it's the individual lives that matter most.
Yes.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the war itself, but I want to circle back to those Buddhist themes that permeate the book. How does the Tale of the Hike present the relationship between human action and fate?
That's a great question. The book seems to suggest that both fate and human action play a role in shaping events. On the one hand, there's a sense that the Taira's downfall is inevitable, a result of their karmic burden.
You reap what you sow.
Exactly.
Actions have consequences.
Right. But at the same time, the book also shows how individuals make choices. Even within the constraints of fate, there are moments where characters could act differently, choose a more virtuous path, but often they don't. blinded by ambition or trapped by circumstances.
Like this constant tension between free will and destiny,
Yes.
where characters are trying to find their own agency, but within this larger web of forces beyond their control.
I like that. That tension is also reflected in how the book portrays the relationship between humans and the divine.
Interesting.
We see deities intervening in human affairs, offering guidance and warnings. But it's ultimately up to individuals to choose whether to heed those warnings or follow their own desires.
So we have this interplay of fate, free will, and divine intervention. I'm curious about how the book uses the supernatural to enhance the story. We talked about Yoshitsune training with the Tengu, but there are all these other instances of ghosts and dreams and omens.
Yeah.
They add a layer of mystery and suspense.
They do.
But do they also serve a deeper purpose?
I think so. For one thing, the ghosts and omens serve as reminders of the impermanence of life,
Right?
the way the past haunts the present.
Echoes of those who have gone before.
Exactly.
A reminder that even the greatest warriors and emperors are mortal.
Yes.
It's almost like the supernatural is a way of making those Buddhist themes more tangible,
I agree.
more visceral for the reader.
Yeah.
And then the dreams,
Yeah.
often prophetic visions, glimpses into the future, adding this layer of fatalism, suggesting that some events are predetermined,
I think you're right.
beyond human control.
It's fascinating how the book uses these different supernatural elements to explore different aspects of the human experience.
We have the ghosts reminding us of the past, the dreams hinting at the future, and the deities representing those forces that lie beyond human comprehension.
Exactly. All these elements work together to create this truly epic and multifaceted story.
This has been so insightful. We've covered so much.
We have.
The rise and fall of the Taira, the complexities of the Minamoto, the tragedy of Yoshitsune, the interplay of fate, free will, and the supernatural. But I feel like there's still more to explore, especially in terms of the book's ending and its lasting impact.
There is. We've only just scratched the surface.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the tale of the Heike. We've journeyed through the rise and fall of the Taira, seen the complexities of the Minamoto, and delved into those supernatural elements that really add a lot to this epic tale.
It's an amazing story.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the battles and the political intrigue. There's this deeper philosophical layer that we need to explore. We've talked about impermanence and karma, but I'm wondering how the book ultimately resolves those ideas.
Well, one thing that really struck me about the ending is that sense of melancholy.
Melancholy.
Yeah, even though the Minamoto win, there's no real feeling of triumph. Instead, the book emphasizes the tragic cost, the loss of life on both sides, the enduring power of grief.
It's like that scene with the former Empress Kenraiminen, who was once surrounded by all the opulence of the Taira court, but after the clan falls, she's living in poverty and simplicity.
Exactly. It's such a powerful scene because it shows how even those at the top can lose everything in an instant.
It really highlights that Buddhist idea of detachment, letting go of worldly possessions, and finding peace in the face of impermanence.
Yes.
It's almost like the book is saying that true happiness isn't about success in the world, but about spiritual enlightenment.
I think that's a valid interpretation. The Empress's story acts as a counterpoint to the Taira's pursuit of power and glory.
Right.
She finds peace, not in material wealth, but in her Buddhist devotion, her acceptance of impermanence.
It's a powerful message, especially in a story that's so focused on ambition and violence.
It is.
A reminder that there's another way to live, a path that leads to inner peace.
And that message is reinforced in the final section of the Book of Swords.
I was wondering about that.
It might seem like a strange addition,
It does.
but I think it ties everything together.
How so?
Well, the Book of Swords is essentially a catalog of famous Japanese swords, each with its own history and legend. And these swords, in a way, represent the samurai class, their power, their honor, their code of conduct.
So by focusing on swords at the end, the book is reflecting on the legacy of the samurai.
Exactly. It makes the reader think about the nature of power, how it can be both creative and destructive.
The swords are like the samurai themselves, capable of great things, but also instruments of violence.
Right.
It's like the book is asking what will happen to the samurai now. Now that the war is over, will they use their power for good? Or will they continue the cycle of violence?
It's a question that still resonates today.
It does.
The samurai legacy is complex.
It is.
Full of both good and bad.
And the tale of the Heike, By showing us this nuanced view of the samurai, challenges us to think critically about their role in history.
I agree. It's not just a simple glorification of warriors.
No.
It acknowledges their bravery and skill, but also their capacity for cruelty.
So what do you think is the book's ultimate message?
I think it's a story that ultimately affirms compassion, recognizing our shared humanity, even in those we see as enemies.
That's a beautiful thought.
It reminds us that clinging to power and glory leads to suffering.
While embracing impermanence and seeking enlightenment can bring a deeper kind of fulfillment.
Exactly.
That's a message that feels so relevant today, in a world that seems consumed by conflict.
I agree. The Tale of the Hike is a timeless masterpiece. It offers profound insights into the human condition, the nature of power, and the search for meaning in a changing world.
It's been such a pleasure exploring this book with you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Till next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep seeking out those stories that challenge and inspire us.